excellence might sound a little bit arrogant, whereas enablers is basically what you do when you're in a center of excellence. You enable others to run experiments. You're not the one presenting the brilliant A/B test to your colleagues anymore. You enable others to run A/B tests. You enable others to optimize and have great results. So therefore, I like to call it center of enablers.
Welcome to nohacks.show, a weekly podcast in which smart people talk to you about better online experiences. And that smart person today is experimentation consultant and bestselling instructor with more than 15,000 students taking his courses at Udemy, winner of 2 Experimentation Elite Awards in 2023, keynote speaker, coach, author of CRO Tips newsletter, and conversion manager at Online Dialogue. Ruben de Boer, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What an introduction.
It's all you. This is all I could find out about you from LinkedIn. I bet there's more, and we'll talk about more. So our mutual friend, Tom Vesseling, of course, has told me you're quite a football fan. You're big on optimization and experimentation. That's your job, but you're also a football fan. So I want to know how you optimize your game viewing experience. Is it always the same snacks, wearing the same clothes, or do you have everything like dialed in and just enjoy the game? Like, do you even experiment with that at all? And maybe enjoy the game this season for your team is not the right word, but in general.
No. We miss our captain from your country in our team in Amsterdam. But no, like Tom, I'm also a big football fan. And occasionally we visit games. So yeah, it's fun parallel. I guess there are many differences, but of course there are also some similarities. Basically, with CRO, with Center of Excellences, with consultancy, and with football, you do have the best ways of working together, the best way of setting up experiments, the best tactics in football. But every situation is different. Every situation demands a different perspective, a slightly change to your tactics, a slightly change to your strategies. But we're always optimizing, always improving, and enjoying the game a lot.
Right, but you're not one of those fans that has a pair of socks or a scarf for every single game or for superstitious reasons and things like that. No,
not at all.
Not at all. Okay. So today we're talking about centers of excellence within organizations, or as you call them as well, center of enablers, which I think is a way better name. It's more explanatory of what they're supposed to be doing. And there are 3 different models for a CRO organization to operate with: centralized, decentralized, and center of excellence model. So can we briefly talk about all 3 and the pros and cons, and maybe compare them to building a football team? Because since you're the expert there.
I have to think about we can surely talk about the 3 different setups. I'm not sure if I can straight away immediately see the parallel with football, but we can try. It sounds fun.
We can always try.
Yeah. No, indeed. Side note, I do like to call them, I think Center of Enablers is a better name in the sense of the work you do as an experimentation center of excellence, but I don't want to get into a naming discussion because that's one we already have in the world of CRO. Like, should we call it conversion rate optimization? Should we call it experimentation, decision-based science here, as some people say? So I don't want to get into a naming discussion, especially the Center of Excellence is not just a name for the experimentation Center of Excellence. You see it in more fields, so it's more a well-known common term in more fields, and your colleagues might understand what it is. I think we should just be aware that excellence might sound a little bit arrogant, whereas enablers is basically what you do when you're in a center of excellence. You enable others to run experiments. You're not the one presenting the brilliant A/B test to your colleagues anymore. You enable others to run A/B tests. You enable others to optimize and have great results. So therefore, I like to call it center of enablers, but center of excellence is a common term. And let's not get another naming discussion in our industry, because CRO experimentation discussion is already big as it is.
100%. And now that Google has thrown in key events instead of conversions in GA4, we're up for another hot debate this year, I'm sure.
Key event optimization,
Exactly. event optimization is probably going to be a new industry. Maybe, who knows? So the three models, centralized, decentralized, and center of excellence. Let's just briefly talk about differences between each one. So what's the centralized model about?
Yeah, so basically, you can have all CRO, all experimentation done by one team in the organization. And of course, it's very easy to, there's a lot of knowledge sharing there. You know exactly who's responsible for the tooling. You know who is exactly responsible for recruitment of CRO specialists. So it's a strong team with a lot of knowledge sharing, working together on experimentation. The difficult thing is, big negative thing is that generally this centralized team is far away from the product teams, meaning it's harder maybe even to have a developer in the team. It's harder to run big innovative experiments, and you're only sticking to small optimization experiments, not doing any innovative stuff, simply because you're so far away from the product teams. And it's also, when not in the product teams, you are less of a specialist for the product or the parts of the product itself, which is different when it's all decentralized, when the specialists operate in the product teams. Then all the specialists become an expert in their domain. It's easier for them to align with their colleagues in the product teams. And the product teams might adopt experimentation more. However, here, what I often see is there's a less of a communication, knowledge sharing between the CRO specialists. Always a question, who's responsible for budget regarding tooling, because CRO specialists are spread through the organization. There's no centralized team, and there's no clear indication of who is the first contact person for higher management regarding experimentation and especially culture and optimization organization itself. In a hybrid form, both centralized, decentralized, that's, I guess, the best one, the center of excellence. When you get a center of excellence, you have the CRO specialist in the different product teams. They become the owner of experimentation in their product teams. They become an expert at their domain. They collaborate with their colleagues so they can run the big innovative experiments, but also small experiments. And they are supported by a center of excellence. And a center of excellence is responsible for making experimentation as easy and as accessible as possible for everyone. They are the one responsible for the quality, the velocity, education, helping, enabling others to run experiments, and they're the go-to team for experimentation for higher management. So with the center of excellence, so the hybrid form, that's where I see most success in experimentation within organizations.
Right, so it's basically a hybrid between centralized and decentralized. And what you just described there, it's center of enablers, it's not center of excellence. Yeah. I'll just add to that debate. And what you did in that LinkedIn post, you just called it CoE, which is a very smart way not to get into any heated debates there. So basically, this sounds like something that only works for really large organizations. How does any of this experimentation, organizational structure apply to a smaller organization? Let's say you have 10, 20, 30 people. Does it even make sense to discuss that or not?
Yeah, it does. And like how we started, like you start as in football, of course you have your tactics, which you always have, but you adjust to the situation. And here's the same thing. If it's still a small team, then maybe a centralized approach makes more sense. And as the organization grows, they slowly move towards a center of excellence. It's always steps in maturity, right? A lot of companies start with simply one CRO specialist in an e-commerce or marketing department. At one point, there are several CRO specialists within a silo. And step by step, you grow in maturity. And step by step, you grow towards a center of excellence. And you grow in tooling, in culture, in strategy, and in everything. But it's steps you take. And that's how the organization learns as well. Sometimes I see it when steps are skipped, and then you have a lot of different challenges. Whereas if you grow step by step, that generally turns to work very well. And of course, you do need support from higher management as well to get to that good culture, the good strategy, good scope for experimentation.
Of course, without the support from higher ups, it's not going to happen. So the end goal here with any model is that experimentation, or just thinking that way, is spread throughout the entire organization, not just between CRO people who think that way.
Yeah,
That's kind of
that's-
what everyone
yeah.
should be going for, right?
Yeah. Yes, and that's what I also like about the work, that it's a very nice thing to strive for, and lots of companies won't get there. It's really hard to get there. Of course, the Bookings, the Bings, the Microsoft, LinkedIn's, those are, they started basically digitally, and it's very easy for them to incorporate experimentation in their organization, whereas lots of other companies have a big legacy. But what I like to strive for that is that in such a data-driven, experiment-driven organization, everyone's ideas may be tested. Everyone can make decisions as long as it's based on data. It's not just higher management, it's everyone that can make decisions. And everyone works towards making better products for the customers to hopefully give them happier and healthier lives. So I think it's a wonderful thing to strive for. And many companies, they will never get to a full experimentation culture as we like to see, as we hear on stage by again, the Netflix, the Bookings. But just striving towards that and making more ideas in organization heard, and step by step build better products, that's a wonderful thing to strive for.
So you're someone who has a lot of experience with this, more than maybe anyone, or at least most CRO experts out there. Let's say you have a company where they have one CRO person who's just trying to get things going, and he or she is frustrated that, it's just me fighting against everyone. They're not listening to me. They're not taking that approach. What would your advice be to that person? Because this is the biggest step in going from 0 to 1, basically, with experimentation.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say, you mentioned 2 words in your sentence, which I would say, be careful with that. And it's getting frustrated and fighting. Once you start seeing it as fighting, you're already lost. Because in a fight, there's never a win-win situation. Instead, start using your CRO optimization mindset. In our work, in CRO, we do thorough user research, do data research. We try to A/B test to best match the needs and motivations of our website visitor or digital product users. And we do so with very extensively. We spend many hours trying to understand our user and optimizing our digital products for them with great curiosity. Then once we get to the organization, I see a lot of people, a lot of CRO specialists, growth specialists, they forget that mindset. And we start sending A/B test after A/B test, do which just one competition, send update email after update email without ever asking, like, does someone read our emails? Does someone use our insights? Do they like what we're sending? Is it useful for them? So our website, so the project, we fully optimize it towards the motivation and needs of our users. And internally, we don't show that curiosity. So instead of starting a fight about experimentation, getting an A/B test live, start asking questions. If your key stakeholder does not want you to run an experiment, don't fight, don't get frustrated, get curious. Ask them, what is their fears? Why does this person not want me to run an experiment? And what are his goals, and how can experimentation help them? Find those win-win situations, but start with asking questions and getting curious, just like you do with your website visitors. Now do it with your stakeholders.
What an amazing response to fighting and frustration. I didn't even notice I used those words, but I would bet that that's how most people feel.
Yes,
in that situation.
and I get that.
So this is a wonderful, wonderful response. Now we're talking about, you had a LinkedIn post about CoEs, Centers of Excellence / Enablers, that had, I believe, 7 different tasks that they're supposed to work with. And let's just go through them and let's spend a few minutes on each one. So
Perfect.
Number 1 task would be to make experimentation easy and accessible.
Yeah.
In practice, how does that work?
Well, if something is easy to do, people are more likely to do it, and it's more likely to stick and become a habit. When something's very hard to do, we don't like to do it, right? But when something is very easy to do, everyone can set up experiments, we're more likely to do it. And of course, we are a big fan of statistics and p-values and Bayesian score, etc., but not everyone is a fan of that. So try to limit that information and make it just fun and easy for people to run experiments. You can automate stuff, like automate the analytics side of it, but also automate safeguards to make it easy and safe and also accessible, of course. It should be as easy as possible and doesn't cost too much time to run an experiment. Of course, you want a good thought process, you want good information, good research, you want to have a good hypothesis, but make it easy and accessible, because when something's easy and accessible, it's more likely to stick and become a habit.
That's a really good way of putting it, because it's not just about the hows and how it works. And if it's easy to press a button, it's more likely that someone will press the button. Just to oversimplify it. If it's not easy, if you have to go to the next town to press that button, maybe you're not going to do it. Maybe you might consider it, but not actually do it. So I think this is extremely important as the first task. So second one is education within the organization internally. So what are the best strategies of helping and educating the other teams or other team members?
Yeah. So to make things as easy and accessible as possible, of course, tooling is very important. You need the right tools, the right setup for people to be able to run experiments. But as a center of excellence, it's not just stuff. It's not just tooling you're responsible for. And one of the important things there indeed is education, because the right education, preferably tailor-made education based on the team, it becomes easier and becomes a lot better to run experiments, higher velocity, higher quality. And to answer your question, the answers, of course, as a consultant, it always depends. For some teams, a workshop might work. For others, manuals or checklists. For others, it's one-on-one coaching. Or for other companies, it might be experimentation in onboarding processes. It's the same as again, for optimizing your websites, optimizing organizations works the same way. When I start with my team with a new big client, we always do an extensive maturity audit, not for the organization, but for each team separately. And for each team, we decide upon a plan how to grow them in experimentation maturity, how to educate them, how to increase the culture, how to increase the scope, of course, check the data. But each team is different. But education is definitely a very important one, because without knowledge, it's very hard to run experiments.
Absolutely. And also, I guess you have to be proactive with the education and not just wait for something to go wrong and then them to ask you, how do I do this? If the education, if the materials are out there and easy to access and use, I think the situation is better. Also, the parallel between working with your website and working with your organization, I love that. You mentioned that twice. I mean, this is why cobbler's kids have the worst shoes, because no one really works on their stuff. We fix things for clients, but when it comes to fixing the internal things, not that people are bad, people just don't do it. And
exactly.
I think this is a really good example. So next task, and I think this one is really important, is bringing people and I guess teams together and letting them work. So I guess with a centralized model, this is more difficult than it is with a decentralized and with a center of excellence model.
Yeah, absolutely. It's bringing people together, having them learn together, but also create a safe environment is absolutely essential. And learning together is not just about winning A/B tests or any other A/B test, which is important to share that information, but also about the process on how to cope with stakeholders and resistance, learn from each other and create that safe environment. And I have a big client that just started working on experimentation in the different product teams. With my team, we educated different UX designers and analysts to work more CRO experimentation data driven. But these are all in very different teams and they barely even knew each other. And of course, there's a lot of information coming towards them. There's lots happening also with their job itself, because they are now responsible for experimentation in their product teams. And they might start feeling lonely. But instead, from those different people from different teams, we made one CRO team. We meet every week, share ideas, share what challenges, share successes, of course, celebrate successes, just to make the team, bring them together and learn from each other. And that's absolutely crucial.
That's almost like a support group, basically, what you just described.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. The next one is, and this is something I talked to Ton about on this podcast, is provide safety. And we talked about safe environments within experimentation.
Yeah.
Now, there's a whole episode where I discussed this with Ton, but I would like to hear your take on this. Why is that so crucial? Is it really that people feel afraid of their experiments failing? Like, is this an organizational mind shift or is it an individual mind shift?
It could be both. Of course, when you run experiments, and a rule of thumb is that 25% of experiments results in a positive uplift on your main KPI. It means that 75% of everything you do makes no impact or even decreases the conversion rates or other KPIs you're testing for, which makes you really humble in the things you do. But also, if you're an organization with a lot of legacy and they're not used to this and they're not used to share failures, it can be really hard and challenging to run experiments simply because you're afraid you'll get punished for not having a winner or for doing something wrong, or maybe your test causes a bug on the website. When you're really afraid of that, you might not test it. And if you only get rewarded or you get punished for failing stuff, then as well you might not test it, because then no one knows if it's a failure or a winner. So safety, psychological safety, a learning culture it's just vital for experimentation.
And this has to go all the way up to management, because it's just not going to work. If there's someone above who says, "Hey, you failed this, you messed up the conversion rate for like 7 days in your experiment," then it's just not. But then again, a test cannot really fail.
Exactly. But that's a mindset shift.
Yep.
Not everyone is there. And indeed, in the most safe environments, in the organization with the best learning culture, it's employees and board members alike. Once board members start sharing their failures, which is a big mind shift for many organizations, but once they start doing that, they send a message to the teams, to their employers, that failure is only part of the process. It is necessary to achieve success. Because if we don't fail, we don't take risks, that's when we don't succeed. But if the board members can even share their biggest failures of that month, of the week, wherever they share it, it sends a message to the whole organization that taking risks and failing is only part of the road to success.
That's a great point. And I will just add that this is another post from LinkedIn. I cannot remember who the author was a few weeks ago. Basically, in experimentation, LinkedIn, which is a big thing, there's a lot of people, a lot of smart people there.
Absolutely.
Nobody shares failures. It's always about wins. It's always about uplifts. It just doesn't happen. And we cannot expect, we as experimenters or optimizers, others to start accepting that approach and normalizing failures if we're not doing it. So I guess that's probably has to be the first step where this will start changing. So next one is provide efficacy for the team members and the organization. How does that work?
Yeah, so efficacy means that what you do, you believe that it results in something that matters, right? Because if you're going to do something that doesn't matter in the end, we're not going to do it. And in organizations regarding experimentation, of course, that is crucial. Because if you run an experiment and it's a winner, for instance, and your stakeholders state, but I don't like something about a test, so we'll not implement it on the website, or start doubting the data, or they give resistance, whatever the outcome of an experiment, then of course you're not motivated to run more experiments because it doesn't matter. The outcome doesn't matter. Eventually your manager or a board member will make a different decision. So also as Center of Excellence, you should be responsible that experimentation results are accepted throughout the entire organization, to motivate people to run experiments. Because if they're not accepted, then why run an experiment?
100%. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the next one, which is give sufficient autonomy to people who are running the experiments. Because efficacy without autonomy and being able to do it on your own and decide on your own kind of doesn't really make sense. So the team member or everyone on the team or organization really needs to know that what they're doing will be appreciated, respected, implemented, whatever needs to happen, but also that they can initiate the change and initiate the experiments on their own. The last one here, the seventh one, is stimulate a culture of experimentation. And this is kind of the big philosophical one, the big shift that needs to happen. First, my take, and then I want to hear yours. This needs to start with the center, the CoEs, but if it doesn't spread, it failed throughout the organization. Am I right or completely wrong on that?
Yeah, Well, maybe it has to start at the top, because they are eventually the ones that decide if there's going to be a center of excellence in the first place. But yeah, it's what you're striving for to get to a culture of experimentation, so everyone can run experiments. Everyone works data driven, experiment driven. It's basically a lot of things you already mentioned combined to get to that culture of experimentation. And as mentioned, a lot of companies will never get to the culture of experimentation we see with the big tech companies, but it's something you stimulate, it's something you strive for, and step by step you can grow in maturity and create an experimentation environment, experimentation culture.
And like you said, a lot of companies will never reach that highest level of experimentation culture, but if you don't try, if you don't
and there are examples of companies that did reach those heights with a lot of legacy. And what I see in the market is that experimentation CRO is growing, right? I mean, the difference between markets and countries are huge. But when I simply look at the client requests, the client questions we get at Online Dialogue, I think 5-6 years ago, most of the questions we received, most of our clients just wanted us to run all A/B tests with the full team. And I think 3-4 years ago, they already had 1 or 2 specialists, and the question was more like, hey, add a CRO lead and maybe one or two of your specialists at Online Dialogue, create a multidisciplinary team and run A/B test for us. So it was a combined team. So it started with only Online Dialogue, now a combined team with the client. And now more and more we get questions like, hey, we have these CRO specialists, they operate in the marketing department or they operate in a silo, and we want to move them to the product teams. Can you please help us with the strategy, with the training, with the processes, to make it as smooth as possible and learn those product teams together with our CRO specialists how to run experiments. And this is all steps in maturity, right? Going from outsourcing everything or just one CRO specialist in a silo to combined multidisciplinary teams, still in marketing, e-commerce, to now in product teams. And you see that the maturity in the market is growing. And of course, this is what we see in the Netherlands. Netherlands is a bit ahead of most countries.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yes, so it's different per country, per market, but it is growing. So my hope is that with time, a lot of more companies will reach that experimentation culture. And again, that every idea is heard, every idea may be tested. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a junior, every idea is welcome, and together we work on better products.
And I love that you mentioned the Netherlands, because that was my final question I wanted to ask. How come there are so many experimentation and optimization experts from the Netherlands? I want to hear your take. I ask everyone from the Netherlands that I talk to on this podcast. I want to hear your take.
Yeah, I heard also you asked Ton. And for those who know, Ton is my, I'm never allowed to say he's my boss, so I'll say he's my mentor and friend. But I agree with his take. I think it's first of all culture. We've always been innovative as a small country, and we're also quite flat. We're not very hierarchical. So whenever it's not strange to walk into the office unannounced of your manager or one of your bosses. So it's very open, very innovative. So we have the right culture, but then of course you still need people to motivate and stimulate experimentation within the country. And I think that based on what I see and saw, is Ton absolutely played a huge role in promoting experimentation in the Netherlands together with his business partner Bart. And also we had Booking.com, who are masters of experimentation, which is a Dutch company. So those two combined and the culture, I think that really stimulated the whole of Netherlands to grow faster than many other countries.
It's almost like a national sport.
Well, there's still lots of work to do. I can imagine it looks very, really bright from the outside, and from the inside, still lots of work to do. But we are doing great.
You sure are.
With that.
You absolutely are. And on that note, I'm beyond thankful for you doing this interview. It was a pleasure to talk to you about centers of, let's call them enablers. Let's end on that note. And to everyone listening to this episode, please consider rating, reviewing, and sharing. And I will talk to you next week.